everyone. We're delighted to be here today with a very special guest. And I have to say, it's the first time in my life that social media has brought people together in a way that you'd never expect. So, Eric Kutz, is that how you say your surname? Because we've never actually met him. Kutz, yeah. Okay.
Kutz.
So, Eric actually is just one of those teachers who has, is always open and searching and looking online. He teaches in the University of Maryland, and previous to that was teaching in Luther College in America. And Eric is one of these musicians who actually was in Juilliard with my sister, and somehow they managed to, on social media, see a piece that I had written for cello. Eric got in touch with me, and suddenly his students played the piece. So, talk about music magically happening across continents. It's really, really so exciting to have you here. Eric is a wonderful soloist, concerto soloist, chamber musician. You were part of a string quartet, a very well-known string quartet. Tell me the name again of your string quartet.
Well, right now I'm in the Left Bank Quartet, and many years ago I was in the Chester Quartet. So I've been in two professional quartets in my life.
So you've a lot of patience, Eric, is what it is. It's funny because
I'm very diplomatic.
I would say so. So it's so great to have someone who actually has such a broad, wide range of experience in so many different areas, because that really that's the type of musician that we like to be, is the type of musician who back in Mozart or Haydn's day did everything and did it all to an incredibly high standard. So it's just our total pleasure to have you here. And as well, Katie has another connection which we hadn't foreseen, so it's just so lovely to come together. Katie, I'll let you in there.
Oh, well, yeah, it's just, I'm from the DC area originally, and University of Maryland's very near there, and we have, I'm sure, many mutual musical friends, because the music world's very small, but Dan Levitoff, shout out to Dan if he's watching.
Yes.
I don't know Dan, but I'll shout out too.
Yes, you will do soon, I'm sure, Ailbhe. We're making the cello world smaller and smaller every week, aren't we? It's just super.
Let's do more of that.
Yeah. Anyway, so Pauper 3. I'm so thrilled to hear what you have to say about this one, Eric.
Well, I was so glad that this one was available, because this. Is it weird to say it's one of my favorites? I don't know.
No,
it's one of the ones. It's one of the ones that I teach the most, and in fact, almost everyone who comes into my studio, this is the first Etude that we do, and it's become almost a rite of passage in my studio that the new people will play Pauper 3 in the studio class the second or third week, depending on how quick they're grasping it. And I just think there's so much to work on with this particular Etude, and also the fact that none of them are easy, but this one is not particularly hard, so you can dial back the difficulty of the actual notes a little bit and focus on kind of technical fundamentals. I think it's a great one for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that this is also quite melodious, and it's one of the ones that it's so pretty to play that you can really enjoy getting into your legato and everything to do with all those harmonies that Pauper was able to just churn out with all of his amazing repertoire for cello.
Speaking of the legato, the first thing that I talk about with this Etude is about the string crossings, because one of the words I would use to describe this Etude, both harmonically and the legato, is wormy. It's a wormy one, and to get that without kind of being chunky in it, you need to really think about anticipating the new angle of the string every time you cross. So clearly, if I have my D string going here, then I'm going to morph rather than one kind of snap motion. I'm going to morph into the A string like that. So I'll have them practice each string crossing as a double stop. So. And so forth. So
I love that. That's for
so
me.
Cool.
We're always talking about bow circles, because I'm obsessed with bow circles. And you should, if you're going towards a string crossing, always be just ready to tilt, that there's never a moment, unless we're actually trying to play something quite percussive, that just doesn't exist. Everything's circular. So that's a great way to actually teach students how to edge up. If you can do it more and more gradually, then we get closer and closer to that legato we want, right?
Yeah, this isn't the only kind of thing that I talk about the bow leading, but I mean, it's one example of a place where I think the sound is always going to be kind of behind unless the bow is leading. And it's in terms of crossing, in terms of contact point when you shift. There are many times I think you need to lead with the bow like that. So that's one thing that I use this Etude for. Another one, there's so much kind of 4-to-1. It's almost like a scale. You know, we practice scale in broken thirds, and there is a lot of that kind of motion in this one too. So I always think of like you want an ideal arc or balance point between whatever finger you're on and that bone on the bottom of your elbow. And so as I go, I'm going to exaggerate to make my point, but you see how my wrist like does that as I go from the first to the fourth finger. So there I'm balanced toward 4, and then right away balance to 1 and roll into it. So again, the wormy legato of it can work with the left hand too, so that I'm not kind of, so that it's not so kind of digital. Now I know there are teachers I respect a lot who that kind of percussive drop thing is a big part of their technique, and I think there's a place for that, but in an etude where you want to kind of do this, I think we need to adjust how we put our fingers down to make that happen.
Actually I find it really fascinating that if you go into the recording studio, and I would have done a lot of strengthening exercises in my time, you know, and you're there and suddenly you hear all this, you know, Casals style in his Bach suites, and you're like suddenly like, I mean, I did not mean to mock Casals because he's a legend.
So you won't be the first, right?
Well, this is the funny thing is, you know, you go into a recording studio, and I love hearing the breathing. I love hearing a little bit of the person, but at the end of the day, I don't want that to overtake my musical experience. So I personally would have had to suddenly think about balance again, and how much do I really need? Even as you get older as a cellist, if you're going to be a long-term marathon cellist who plays until they're 90, you don't want to be overusing strength, because you just need to use whatever amount is necessary for that moment. And this is a great etude to work on that, right?
And you can also do, go ahead, Katie.
Oh, well, I was just going to say one more thing about the hand balance. I mean, I think it's important to point out as well, a lot of times people get really consumed by intonation being physically where you are, you know, like hitting that geographical spot. And it's so much about balance in the hand. You can be in completely the right spot, but the balance is off, so your intonation suffers as a result. I mean, again, this is, as you've pointed out, Eric, not the most challenging of studies, but it's a great opportunity to focus on that, you know, really concentrate on that hand balance, being at the absolute, like, you know, center of your intonation and stuff. So, sorry, go ahead though.
No, I find when I play out, you know, at a high level, when you play out a tune, it's almost always there's tension involved. You know, if all my knuckles are not flexible, then I can't make those little adjustments that I need. So to, you know, one kind of other idea on this point, I'll practice this, what I call quasi-harmonic, and go, so when Katie, you reminded me of this when you said how much you need. So I'll find that harmonic on the D string there, and then slowly, I know it's a lovely sound, but then as soon as I get it, then that's as much as I need to use, and that's an amazingly little amount of pressure. So I'll start this etude like this. Then, and it takes like nothing to be actually playing then. So
that's a great way of doing it. Yeah, I love that idea.
Well, and in orchestra a lot, when you can't hear yourself, you know, all the time, it's so easy to kind of get grabby and pound things pound things out. So it's a good kind of refresher to remind yourself, here's what I actually need to get the string down.
Yeah. And then on top of that, if you end up putting different weights on every finger, say for example, some people's finger strength, they'd be great at putting the weight over the first finger, but like you say, just making sure that you actually have that balance over the hand, then you'll find you might have something like this. You get these weird, even though the bow might, I did that with my bow, I totally cheated, but there I didn't. So you've actually got that weight that's interfering with your quality of legato sound as well. So there's just so much to this, even though we think, sure, it's an easy popper. Popper was having a laugh at us, I think.
So
no such thing as an easy popper, right?
Well, it's pretty hard to play just about anything well.
Yeah, true that.
Down the rabbit hole we go. Anyways.
Yes. So I sent you a picture of my own little annotation of the first couple of lines, and so this also is part of my teaching of this etude. I make students go through the whole etude like that. So what we've done is bracketed off everything that you can do in one position, and that's kind of step one. And then after you learn where you shift, then I write in the actual interval that my first finger is going. And Katie, this ties in again to what you said about, we think of intonation like hitting that note. And the phrase I use is, we need to enlarge the target. So when I shift, if I'm just playing a C major scale and I'm playing, now I've got my first shift in the scale, and even though D and E obviously are a major second apart, I'm thinking of that shift as going a perfect fourth, because my first finger is going from B to E. So I'll have folks practice their scales, because now we got another fourth, another one, minor third, major third. So I've just made a whole bunch of different shifts into just three kinds. And so when you start seeing all your old friends back, you're like, oh, I don't need to miss that, because that's a perfect fourth, and I know I know how far a perfect fourth is.
I think we're quite similar in how we approach, because we just had a big nerdy shift talk the other day, but like that you always, I mean, in this one, the link notes, and making sure that if you have, especially anywhere that would have that, something like, so that you're actually doing your perfect fifth, that it's 100% clear. And here, people get so bogged down with that shift that then their bow waggles as well. Mm-hmm. So thinking about, you know exactly where you're going, and then it's no issue. It's never going to be a problem. You don't have to get your bow involved in some kind of panic flutter. It's, it's fine. We're all good.
Speaking of panic flutters, I'm sorry if this steals one of your points, Eric, but around bar 19, I mean, just because we're talking so much about legato and stuff, it really, I think, makes sense to point this out now, but I noticed around there, when it's all up here, I noticed I had a little bit more tension in the left hand when I was practicing this, and I was like, oh yeah, it's because of the bow pattern, really, and again, a thing Ailbhe and I talk about a lot in these are practicing just the bow rhythm separately from the left hand. And I thought, like, a place like that, it's really the coordination of the string crossing. If you can do that, like, absolutely metronomically, I find myself, even when I was practicing this, how much you have this unwanted tension in your left hand just because you're trying to get the note to sound clear. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. Is that for those of us with no bar numbers in our old editions? Is that where the pianissimo
is?
Okay. Again, I'd look at that place like making sure that I'm starting to travel on the note before. So it's go, 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 and so forth. That way I get the herky-jerkiness out of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm totally
And
going to
that-
start doing this double stop string crossing business. It's so good.
Oh, it's great
Such a
for
good-
pitch too, because you can check all the fourths. So many fourths in this thing, which of course, you know, fourths have no makeup on at all. They're either right or wrong, right? So, you know, right from the start of it, and then throughout the etude, so many of the crossings are fourths.
Yeah, especially in this key as well. It means this is something that we would play with singers a lot, you know, and you'll turn up and suddenly be given something like this, and you really need to be centered in your pitch, or else everything sounds disgusting. So this is a great study for that. I found that area. So your PP sound. Another issue with it is, so obviously you're trying to be very clear in your left hand, but your bow placement for your cello, I mean, it's definitely a big wolfy area for my cello. I don't know about yours.
Yes.
But, you know, where are you actually going to place? Are you going to place, which is a little bit more core sound, but if you go too far back here, it's just getting in danger of actually hitting off the other two strings. So we do want the core, but obviously it's much more difficult to make it sound pure.
Well, and you need
closer to the bridge.
you need some kind of contact in that particular area, because you have, you know, what, 17 notes on one bow.
Yeah.
So you can't be traveling too fast. But I think they're, I recall, I think it was Colin Carr who introduced me to the idea of that things are kind of like a multiple bar graph. Like if you turn one thing up, something else can come down, but you can't turn everything down. Like what I mean by that, like you can't have the contact over the fingerboard, the bow speed really slow, no vibrato. Like that would be turning all of the tools off, and then you end up with kind of nothing.
Yeah. Exactly.
So as you know, as bow speed goes down, one other thing has to come up. The only thing I'd add to what you said, Ailbhe, is that I think the string speaks better when the bow is straight. And so this idea again of anticipating the angle helps it speak when I'm trying to be really, you know, quiet.
Exactly.
About it.
Yeah, so
That
good
was
good
nice.
mirror practice. This is why this would be great for all of us, because we'll be able to actually look at ourselves as we're doing it, making sure that we're exactly exactly right.
You know, I mean, have you ever had the experience where
Sorry, that's my earphone. 1 second. This is why your earphones are much better than ours, because occasionally
well, they look dorky, but they stay on my head.
Yeah, exactly.
You look like you're gonna go do a session in London.
You do.
Session.
Yeah, much more professional cello style.
Very, very LA of me.
Yes.
Have you ever had the experience where you can't get the C string to speak, or I see people like, you know, pluck it like this or something like this, but if I've got the bow angle like this, of course it's not going to speak. But if I have, then it's like no problem. So it was the C string that kind of taught me about how important getting the straight bow is when I'm having trouble with something speaking. And of course, pianissimo and third position on the G string are both not conducive to things speaking easily.
Do you guys know this thing? I learned this actually when I did my master's in Suzuki pedagogy, but it was they call it the Suzuki Highway, and you rock back and forth on the bridge and do that business. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I love that
brilliant.
for finding the
Really
bow
brilliant.
angle, no matter where you are in the bow.
Two kind of musical things that I try to teach in this Etude too, that obviously you can use many other examples for, but the sequences are so obvious, and using them to kind of build the music that you have that. That
So dramatic.
you make the crescendo kind of like by provoking. It's like you keep poking your sibling every half bar in that harder and harder, you know.
It's kind of actually like Bach in a way that you're thinking,
Yes.
you know, or the top as well.
Yes.
whatever notes they are, that you can use this as a kind of preparation for always being aware of the surround sound and the bass and the melody and all the different things you can do in between.
Well, and that a crescendo isn't necessarily, a crescendo doesn't mean that every single note is louder than the preceding and softer than the following.
Yeah.
No,
Exactly.
you still have, just like if I make a crescendo in my voice, that doesn't mean the prepositions and the conjunctions get louder. It's the main words that you keep increasing, and it's the same with music.
I was about to do a sentence there with me doing that, but I thought I was going to resist, and now, no, I couldn't. Sorry, I'm 5 years old, I'm aware of that. It's interesting you mention that, because this, I don't feel like so you would be saying a 30-second note, right? I did go to college in America.
I would say
I should have it. So I don't want those to jump out of the texture too much.
Right.
Not only because they don't have the accent on them, but also I think it's quite apparent musically that we're just coming back, even though there's no dim written within that.
Well, to really geek out on this, you could have a different level of emphasis on the 32nd note depending on where it is in the crescendo. I totally agree with what you're saying, like at the beginning. And then by the time we get to the forte, right, I can get that character by having just a little bit under the bow intentionally there.
And I think that adds to everything, that whenever you are constructing a musical piece, you don't necessarily have to have every little sub-phrase played exactly the same way. So you can use another one of your colour palettes, bow legatos, vibrato, any of that, to change it up so it doesn't become predictable. I think that's a great thing this teaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, very, very nerdy and slightly personal, but with these accents, when the bow pattern changes, to facilitate the crescendo, I was thinking about this and I was like, oh, right, I mean, it's legato before, so perhaps Popper still wants us to be quite legato there when we change the bow, but not necessarily, right? I mean, it's that whole thing of we have the freedom as an artist to look at something and decide, is it going to be really that legato, or perhaps I'm going to use this opportunity to really highlight the accent more. And I think it's important to make people aware that you have those decisions, when you play music, and of course they're informed by stylistic things, but
I think how you use the bow then is the way. That's a great way to spark the imagination, and then how you use the bow determines how successfully you execute that. Because I'm looking at that line. What is that? Bar 7. Whether the fastest part of the bow is at the front, then I can put a stinger, like that. But if the last 16th note of the first beat gets the most bow, that's how I would have this kind of accent that kind of organically leads out of the preceding slurred ones.
And it's kind of cheeky.
Possibilities are endless.
I know. That's what I love. I do love this Etude, I have to admit.
Yeah, it's great. I also love that bar 9, the way you have all of this. And then it leads into this next thing. It's slightly dangerous, because you could actually, after everything that's gone on before, suddenly break this down into tiny pieces. But really you want it to just float over. And then you're back at do we want to dim into MF? Yeah. This is really rabbit holing it, but you get the general gist.
Yes.
Overall, longer phrase structures here make this suddenly into a musical piece a lot more than just in your, say, 2 beats in 2 beats.
I love the corresponding place at the end of 16, I think it is. Because here he instructs us to get down to piano. and then yet another lower dynamic marking here, so we end up now. I think that's my favorite moment in the Etude, when we get to the piano and you expect to continue in piano, and then we continue in piano.
It's so good. It's so good.
Wow. We'll see how well I execute those dynamics with the proper 3S right here.
Yes. I have a pink and a blue highlighter that I use for this with when students repeatedly do not make dynamic modifications that I ask them to. So my studio, I don't know, it's not a written down policy, but the unofficial policy is if I have to tell you about the dynamics 3 times, then you get the highlighter. And the look of horror as people, when I put in the pink one, the mezzo forte and above are pink, and mezzo piano and below are blue. And so I'll put in, and it does give you this kind of global sense of what the dynamics, dynamics are, and it also, I think, the trauma of it makes the student observe the dynamics more faithfully in the future.
I'd say so. You can see them hiding their score in their bag, not showing it to any of their friends anymore.
I'd love to hear the story when they're 80, and they take out their, Dvorak concerto, and there's like pink highlighter on. They'll never forget you, Eric.
That's right.
I love it. Everyone needs a good story about their teacher like that, right?
Yes.
It's really interesting how both editions have a different bowing, because it's a very different technique, right?
Right.
Barenreiter has this up bow. So you're really trying to dim while getting to the heaviest part of the bow. And I know we always do that, but this is really, really quiet and much slower than you expect at the very end of the Etude, right?
Right. And so there are difficulties involved in both of those bowings, because if you start the penultimate bar down bow, then you can lean into the top of the you can lean into the top of the decrescendo. See, I try to get to the tip, and then I don't need to get to the frog. Start to go over the fingerboard. Less hair.
Perfect. See, that's great.
Can you do it while talking? Yes, you can.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and then if you do it in front of lots of people, you get a technique that I call vibrato, right?
Yes.
Well, you might see a bit of that.
Very specialized extended technique, only for very advanced.
For very advanced, very nervous people, you got to get the vibrato.
So, I'm not sure, Eric, did we explain to you that we play it every week to each other? So are you happy for us to play to you as well?
Please, and yes, please, of course.
Excellent. so like gorgeous legato, and just your sound is just delicious. I mean, I love it. What is your cello, by the way? Not that that has anything to do with it, because I know it's a player, but
It's by Raphael Fiorini from Bologna, 1877. And
Nice.
Nice.
It's really, I am so fortunate I got it when I was 19. It's the only cello I've
oh,
kind of ever
Brilliant.
had as a professional.
nice.
Bravo,
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Ailbhe.
Oh, bravo, beautiful. Beautiful. And
It's always
very-
really scary when we have a guest on.
It is. It's always very scary.
Well, then
I
you
mean,
talk, an impassioned reading.
Tell you
I
what,
try,
I was
you know.
very impressed with that extra.
Yes.
I mean, that really gave it an
Alright.
extra kick. I wasn't expecting it. It was awesome.
I know I'm doing a good job of it when I feel my hair flinging around. That's
That's
what I
something you
used
need
to
to
call
learn too.
the Pantene Pro V moments. Yeah, I remember that in some
Yeah.
orchestral Rachmaninoff. The
Not
Eric,
to the extent of either of you, but I did feel the pain of those with long hair during the pandemic, because it was
Yeah.
more than 1 year
wow.
that I went without getting a haircut. So I didn't get it in the peg so much, but it was long enough that I was getting it caught under my
Yeah.
fingers on the C
for a
string.
shift.
Yes,
Not good.
and that
Not
was like more painful than I expected.
It really is.
Absolutely. All right, it's great to
super.
great to
You
meet
too.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
to
Thanks
see you,
so
Eric.
much.
Yeah.
Okay,
Have
take
a
care.
wonderful day.